This is John for John's Beat. I'm here on the beat with Terry Bonadonna of the Windy City ThunderBolts. How are you, sir?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for being here. The reason why I have you, outside I love just talking baseball, the reason why I have you here is you just put out a book called A Wonderful Waste of Time about a season in the press box with the Windy City ThunderBolts. So tell us a little bit about the book.
Yeah, I've been working for the Windy City Thunderbolts as the play-by-play broadcaster since 2010. And I started with the job right out of college. It was my first job as soon as I graduated. I jumped right into it a week later. So it was really a dream of mine to be a play-by-play broadcaster. And first couple of years on the job, I didn't know what I was doing. I mean, you can argue maybe that I still don't know what I'm doing, but I really didn't know what I was doing back then. And so I would set goals for myself every year. I've got to do something to get better. And after a few years, I started to feel like I had gotten into the swing of things, that I knew what I was doing to some extent. I'm not going to say by any means that I had the job perfected. I don't think anybody ever does, but I started to feel confident at least in what I was doing, and so I started to realize maybe it's time to move on from the Thunderbolts because it is an independent minor league baseball team. They play in a small ballpark. It's a lower level league, and the league is really set up for people to move on, for players to move on, for broadcasters to move on, for staff to move on. If you want to keep working in baseball, you move up the ladder at some point. And I wasn't doing that, and I didn't know that I really wanted to because I was having so much fun doing what I was doing, even though I wasn't making a whole lot of money doing it. And I told myself at one point during the summer of 2016, I said, okay, if I'm going to keep doing this, I've got to set different goals for myself. And so for that particular year, the goal was if I'm going to keep working for the Thunderbolts, I'm going to write about it and I'm going to turn that into a book, something that I'd never done before. So I wrote a book about the 2017 Thunderbolts. I did come back for that year and I kept a journal throughout the year. And when the season ended, I wrote it all down. And it turned out to be a really exciting year to write the book. The Thunderbolts were caught up in a playoff race in the Frontier League, and the book ended up being a lot more about baseball than I really intended. I wanted it to be more about just my experiences as a broadcaster. And because the team happened to be locked up in a playoff race that came all the way down to the last weekend, it became very difficult for me to not really turn the book into full-fledged Thunderbolts baseball. And that's really what it became. And so hopefully anybody who reads the book will get a pretty good insight into what it's like to be a broadcaster for a minor league team. But you're also going to get a pretty good insight just into the day-to-day life of a minor league baseball fan.
Now, you brought up an interesting point. I wondered about this. You're with the team for a while, and obviously you love doing it, and I have no problem with that. I think it's great. How do you decide when it is time to leave or if it's time to leave? Because if you really love doing something, there's nothing wrong with continuing to do it.
Yeah, there's a sense that you're not supposed to be doing this for this long. And if you are, it's probably because you have something really good lined up in the off season. I know a lot of people either work broadcasting other sports during the off season, doing basketball or hockey during the winter, baseball during the summer, or they work for a school because you get your summers off and you get to go return to baseball during the summer. I do a lot of work in broadcasting. I announce soccer, football, volleyball during the fall. I do basketball during the winter. I do high school and college baseball and softball during the spring. And so all of that together allows me the time to get away during the summer to do baseball. And I do some teaching as well during the off season. And so I'm able to make ends meet. But the question is, like, at what point do I want to have a real sort of normal life, as we typically define a normal life, where maybe you don't give up 4 months out of the year every year to do nothing but broadcast baseball, and maybe you get a steady paycheck that allows you to be comfortable rather than just getting by. And those are always questions I weigh every year. Is it worth it to keep doing this? And that's why, like I say, I set goals for myself. And for this one particular year, the goal was, if I'm not going to write this book, I can't justify it to myself that it's worth it. So I set different goals for myself for every year. It's not always writing a book, but it's something else that I tell myself, I have to accomplish this, or I'm not going to allow myself to come back for another year, because it is a job, but at the same time, it's my passion. This is like the gift that I give myself every year. If I work hard the rest of the year, I will allow myself to do this as well.
So when you're up there in the booth, do you ever sit back and go like, wow, this is like really cool. I'm actually doing my dream job.
Yeah, when I first started with the team, just walking down onto the field was such a thrill, just being on a professional baseball field. And there were days, and there still are plenty of days, where I get really frustrated with my job because it's a lot of work. It's really long hours. And even though I'm really reading about baseball, watching baseball, talking about baseball, it wears on you sometimes. And there are days where I'm just tired. But what's really nice about it is that I'm sitting in my press box. That's essentially my office during the day. I spend the entire day up there. And anytime I feel a little bit worn down, I just look up and realize, okay, there are a lot of people who get worn down at their jobs, but most of them don't look up from their desk and realize they're sitting above a baseball field. So that to me is the most incredible part of it, is that I'm always where I want to be, even if there are days that it's a little bit frustrating.
No, really good point. You make another good point too. You guys do work very hard. I've done really minor broadcasting. I did a little bit with the Schaumburg Boomers back in the or Schaumburg Flyers back in the day. Did some roller derby, did a little wrestling, but only like one or two shots just for story's sake. You guys work really hard, and I'm sure you know Mike Knezrich with the Chicago Bandits. I see that guy out there all the time. How hard he works. How long is your typical day at a Thunderbolts game?
Typically, if the Thunderbolts are playing a 7:05 game, which is the standard start time, I'm usually at the ballpark between 10 and 11 in the morning. Some days I'm there a little bit earlier. Some days I get a lot of work done the day before, and I might be able to come in a little bit later. But I'm usually there at least an hour after the game. So typically, I mean, my day is I wake up, I eat breakfast, then go to the ballpark. I spend the entire day at the ballpark. I come home, I go to bed. So in terms of the amount of time spent at home, it's just sleeping. It's really not much of anything else. Other than that, I'm at the ballpark. So I really try not to think of it in terms of how many hours a day am I working, because to me, it's more of this is my life right now. For the next few months, this is everything. Even when I'm not at the ballpark, I'm thinking about it. I'm planning out my work day. I'm doing my research. It's just a change of mindset more than anything. I don't like to think of it in terms of the amount of hours I'm working because, like I said before, my work consists mostly of watching baseball, talking about baseball, doing baseball research, all of this stuff. So it's not so much the hours of work that wear you down. It's just the fact that this is always on your mind. And there really isn't anything else for 4 months. At least that's the way it is for me. And to me, I have more fun that way. I think my first year on the job, I started thinking, okay, if I spend X number of hours at the ballpark, that leaves me this many hours to do whatever else I want to do. I have this many off days where I can fit other things in. And that's what really wears me down. When I start to think about what am I going to do on my off days, or what am I going to do when I get off work, because then you start to count down the hours, you start to look forward to that stuff, you start to sort out your life in terms of my work time and my non-work time. Whereas to me, it's easier and it's a lot more gratifying to just think of it as this is my life right now. And I'm lucky enough to be able to do that. I know some people just have life situations where they have other things they need to do.
Sure.
Most people have other things that they need to do. For me, generally speaking, during those few months, I'm able to just kind of dive into it.
So let's get back to your book for a little bit. What can people expect in the book? Do you have stories? Do you have interviews, pictures?
Yeah, like I said, it's really a chronicle of one baseball season. It was the 2017 season that I kept this journal and eventually decided to write about. So it's mostly about the day-to-day operations of the 2017 Thunderbolt. So what I said essentially when I pitched the book to myself really is it's going to be a little bit about baseball, it's going to be a little bit about radio, and mostly it's just going to be about me, which doesn't really sell itself. So the book about Terry Bonadonna, just the things that I say and do and think and feel on a daily basis over the course of a baseball season. And a big part of the reason I wrote it is because I would get asked questions all the time by people who knew that I was a baseball broadcaster, and they thought that sounded interesting, but really had no idea what it meant. And they would ask questions like, "Oh, you work a little bit more than 40 hours a week?" And I'd say, "Yeah, I work a lot more than 40 hours a week." And I said to you, it's pretty much the whole lifestyle at that point. And they would be surprised sometimes if I said that I travel with the team. And I said, yeah, I mean, it's professional baseball. The broadcaster is going to travel with the team. So a lot of it was kind of clearing up what exactly is the job of a minor league baseball broadcaster, because I know there are a lot of books out there on minor league baseball. And I was really kind of shocked when I first had the idea to write it, because I knew I wanted to write it for myself. But I try not to think of things in terms of, is this good for me? Is there a reason to do this, is what I'm usually asking. Is there a need for this in the world? And I mean, there's certainly not a need for it in the world, but I think there's a place for it, because for all the books out there on minor league baseball, and I read every one I can find, there are very few written from broadcasters' perspectives. So I just thought it would be good to give people a look into the world of minor league baseball, specifically from that perspective, from somebody who's calling the games, because I spend a lot of time with the players. I spend more time than that with the coaches, and I spend a lot of time with the front office as well. So you really, as a broadcaster, get a chance to see the operations of the ballpark from every angle. I think probably even more so than almost any other job in the sport. You know, maybe a broadcaster's life is not as interesting to most people as a player's life. Usually people are more interested in what's going on in the player's mind over the course of a season. But a broadcaster, I think, gets to at least witness some of those player stories, as well as seeing the overarching aspects of the ballpark, what's going on around the park from a business standpoint, from a baseball standpoint, from the whole team standpoint, instead of just an individualized focused story. So I thought it would be interesting to give people that look at it. And again, I've been doing this for a long time, about 10 years now. At the time that I started writing the book, I had been doing it for 7 years. So yeah, there are a lot of stories that I was able to interject with from my previous experiences. So on a wide scale, the book is just a day-by-day account of 2017, but then I was able to pick out some of my favorite stories about individual games or individual experiences from the previous 7 years as well. So hopefully I'm able to entertain people that way.
Well, obviously, people are going to be entertained, and people are going to learn, about your job, about your career, about the Thunderbolts. What did you learn about yourself in the book, or through the process, I should say?
I learned that maybe I'm not cut out to be a writer. I had never really done anything like that, and what really surprised me, again, I mentioned that there aren't really many broadcasters' accounts of minor league baseball seasons, and that really surprised me because we're all writers. That's just part of the job in minor league baseball, is that you're writing pretty much day to day. I write game notes every day. I write game recaps every night. I write press releases anytime there's news with the team. So one of the things I thought when I was coming up with the idea to write the book is, if I write a 300-page book, that should take me no time at all, because I write way more than 300 pages per summer just working for the team. But it's different when you're trying to script a story and make an overarching narrative that makes sense to people and is entertaining to people. So I learned a lot just about the writing process. And one thing I told myself, actually, towards the end of the process, is that this is not going to be it for me. Maybe I'm not a great writer. I don't know. It's not my greatest passion professionally, certainly, but I learned so much just about the writing process that I know I want to write another book at some point. I'm not sure exactly what it's going to be about, but I feel like it will have gone to waste. All that I learned about the process of writing a book and publishing a book is going to go to waste if I don't write another one. So I think that's probably the biggest lesson I took away.
Could you share like one interesting story from the book?
Well, 2017, again, was a really interesting season, and it turned out to be a great time to write the book, just because the team was competitive. There were so many exciting games in the year, and I won't give away too much, even though, I mean, I act like I would be giving it away. All of this is public information. It's out there, and you can find it, the result of every game on Baseball Reference anyway. But there were some disappointing results late in the year. The team started to struggle in the midst of the playoff race. And there was one game in particular. It was just one of the wildest games I've ever seen. I won't talk about the details of the game right now because it's all in the book. But I remember coming out of that game and just thinking, that's a chapter right there. That game, and it really made me smile to think about it, because when you're going through these games in a normal season, you try to fit each game into the narrative of the season, because that's your job as a broadcaster, trying to tell these stories and trying to tell each game and each season as its own individual story. But once a game is over, you kind of move on to the next one. You start preparing your notes and thinking, okay, how do I fit last night's game into the overall thing? And it was just such a different experience for me, just because I knew I was going to be writing this book, and I had been keeping that journal throughout the season. And I knew eventually I was going to turn this into a book. And just thinking, after this one really interesting game, which was one of the wildest games I've seen. It was in Lake Erie late in the season. Just thinking, this is a chapter right here. This story. And there were so many games like that late in the year. The Thunderbolts in 2017 just had an incredible bullpen, was their claim to fame, such as fame is in Frontier League Baseball, early in the year. And they started getting guys picked up by major league affiliates. And so late in the year, they started to blow several big leads. And each time I'm watching these games, I'm thinking, this is a tough game to watch, but it's going to be a fun game to write about later. So that to me is one of the things that really sticks with me about that season, because if I had written this book in 2018 or 2019, and both seasons the Thunderbolts were not very competitive, it would have been all about off the field stuff, because it would have been, from my perspective of the season, very much about on field things. And in 2017, my focus tended towards the end of the season really to be on the field, and there were some really interesting games to be played, and I loved that because I'm a baseball fan. So that's my bread and butter. That's where I already felt comfortable, just writing about game action.
If you could broadcast a game, any team, and which team would it be, and who would your broadcast partner be? Past or present, doesn't matter.
Okay, well, as long as we're going past,
one game.
I grew up as a huge Cubs fan, and my dream always was to be the broadcaster for the Chicago Cubs. And I listened to the radio as Pat Hughes and Ron Santo on the call, and I loved Pat Hughes and Ron Santo. I mean, that was my childhood, listening to them. And I got to meet Pat Hughes. I've gotten to meet Pat Hughes several times now. And I asked him, when Ron Santo was still alive, I asked him, what was it like working with, or what is it at the time it was president? I said, what is it like working with Ron Santo? And I expected him to say that he just loved it. It was amazing. And he said, it's actually really challenging, because Ron Santo is a character. He didn't necessarily put in the same amount of preparation that you would typically as a broadcaster for a game. He got by more on personality than anything else. And Pat Hughes did the preparation. He was able to guide them through the games. But I've thought about that a lot ever since. I like working with partners who are really well prepared, who do their homework, who come in ready to be as professional as possible. But I've also worked with partners who are not that way. And I really try to embrace that, because as long as I do my homework, as long as I'm doing my job well, I should be able to help anybody else sound good. And if there's somebody who's an entertaining personality, then that's what I want to work with. I want to work with somebody who can counter me, not somebody who's going to be a clone of me. And so with that in mind, I still would love to have worked with Ron Santo, because to me, just listening to those broadcasts were as fun as anything I've ever experienced. And I know you asked if I could do one game. I'm going to cheat on that, because to me, I do broadcast a lot of different sports, but there's nothing more fun for me than doing baseball. And the reason is because each game is just part of something bigger, and it's not the individual games that are that fun. It's the fact that you're able to watch things develop over a full season. So I think working a Cubs season with Ron Santo would have been my dream when I was a kid, and I don't want to let child me down by giving a different answer. So that's what I would want to do.
Hey, answer. Now, every broadcaster has a call or a game-winning call. What is yours?
I don't have a good one. I can tell you that right now. I did write in the book, actually, about my first year broadcasting. And this is still a problem I have today at the stadium that the Thunderbolts play in, Ozinga Field. Just the angle that you're at from the press box, I have a really hard time judging fly balls. And so I've never had an effective home run call, because I very rarely see a ball hit that I know is a home run off the bat. I'm usually watching, with bated breath, the same way everybody else is. So it's really hard to develop a home run call. And my first year with the team, I went to Gateway Grizzlies, our team that plays down in the St. Louis area, and they just have an open press box, just a perfect angle. I got such a good read on every fly ball. And the first ball that was hit in that series that I knew was a no-doubter, my immediate reaction was just to copy Pat Hughes' call, because I'd been listening to Pat Hughes for many years. And I immediately stopped myself. I said, no, I can't do that. And so I kind of stumbled my way through that call. But I never really had a consistent home run call, in part because I'm kind of not that intrigued by home runs. I love plays with more action in them. I think the problem with home runs is that you hit the ball, it's over the fence, and the play is over. Whereas the ball is put in play, and I know this is the controversy in baseball right now at all levels, that there's not enough action in play. Home runs, strikeouts, walks, nothing really happens. Whereas anytime the ball's in play, I love just describing that action. And I'm a radio guy. I'm not a TV guy. I think home run calls are probably more important, and big, exciting walk-off calls are more important for TV guys because their job is to just enhance the action that people are already seeing. Whereas a radio guy like me, my big concern is just being as descriptive as possible and painting. So I try to change things up as much as I possibly can. And I'm sorry if that makes me bad as an announcer, or if that's a bad answer, but I try to be different every time.
Hey, originality. There's nothing wrong with originality, So before I let you go, tell everybody where they could find a waste of time and all your information.
Yeah, the book is available on Amazon. It's called A Wonderful Waste of Time: Tales from a Summer in the Press Box with the Windy City Thunderbolts and Independent Baseball. And you can also find it and a lot of the other work that I've done on my website, which is terrybonadonna.com.
Well, I look forward to reading the book. I will be ordering it on Amazon. I look forward to a beautiful Saturday afternoon of wasting a wonderful time with your book. It's hard to say it's wasting time with your book, but it's the same concept, as baseball. It's just a beautiful waste of time, and I can think of nothing better than to dive into. I love minor league ball. I've been to Ozingo Field a few times, and I appreciate your time, man. I really appreciate your time, and let's hope that we get back to a lot more baseball next year, and let's get everyone out there to buy this book because minor league baseball is really the best. Terry, Absolutely. I appreciate your time, man.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's been fun, and yeah, I hope that my book isn't too big a waste of time for you. But if it is, I hope it's a wonderful waste.
That's what I mean, man. I say that in all sincerity and in all praise. It would be a wonderful waste of time because I love minor league baseball, and somebody that's been with the team that long and knows as much as you do. I can't wait to dive into this book. So, Terry, I appreciate your time, and you have a good rest of the day, my friend.
I appreciate it. Thank you. You too.
Thank you, sir.